Welcome to this week's America with an Accent. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and today we will honor that. Myself, I'm wearing a brooch that my son Nick made for me for Mother's Day back in 2013 when he was in preschool. I'm also honored to share with you the stories of Judy Kiagiri, Dr. Ingrid Jordan-Thaden, and Bridget Kelly. They are three wonderful ladies from different backgrounds, but that share the same bond, that of motherhood.
In 1999, Judy Kiagiri from Kenya moved to Springfield, Missouri as a student. A single mother, Judy left her daughter in Kenya with her mom, while here met a guy from Ralston, Nebraska, whom she married. From Missouri, the young couple and their first son moved to Washington, D.C., where Judy's daughter joined the family and another son was born. Work relocation took the family of 5 to Nigeria for about 2 years and back to Nebraska in 2010. In 2006, Ingrid Jordan-Thaden, husband, and their 5-year-old daughter moved from Lincoln, Nebraska to Heidelberg, Germany, where Ingrid earned her doctorate while husband completed his postdoctoral studies. In 2011, the family of 3 moved back to the United States, first to Florida, then California, and are now settled in Madison, Wisconsin.
Being a mom in a foreign country, I would say I was obviously born and raised in Kenya, so my frame of reference has always been of my mom and moms that I grew up around. And now that I'm a mom in a foreign country, the US has very different parenting culture. One is that the kids are very independent. They're given a lot of leeway, which is not how I grew up at all. I grew up in a very, everything was pretty much designed and pushed by your parents. They made choices for you, or rather helped you make the choices they wanted you to make. And it's been a little bit of a challenge for me, and it's an ongoing struggle because I have a daughter who's 21. She's very independent, and the Kenyan mom in me is constantly screaming, like wanting to pull her back. But then having lived here and having a different frame of reference, I've learned that, there's nothing wrong with independence.
It was very hard when I knew that she felt like she was understanding the German and was still a little bit worried to speak it. And I worry about her all day long, being in the classroom, not being able to communicate the way that she really wanted to communicate. And the hardest part was when we realized, we went to talk to the teacher, and I don't remember why we actually went, but we had gone to talk to the teacher, and she let me know that Mabel has a coping mechanism, that she would, when she felt too overwhelmed with everything, she would just get out her paper and colors and she would draw pictures, and of just pictures, she would just draw. And so the teacher just took that as that's how she's going to continue studying on her own by just passively learning. But it ended up being where she was doing that more often than not, and she wasn't actually being engaged into the classroom, and the teacher wasn't forcing her to engage, and so we felt like she was falling behind, mainly because the teacher told me that, well, if she's not going to be here for the rest of her schooling, you're temporary here in Germany, then she doesn't really need to know German. But at the same time, she wasn't getting taught math or grammar or other things because the teacher was sort of letting her sit there in the class coloring. And so we switched schools. We actually not only switched schools, we moved to a different neighborhood because that was the only way to switch schools.
Did that help?
Oh yeah. Okay. We went to a school that had, it was more closer to the city, so we had lived up in the hills. So there were a lot of more mobile people, so there were more immigration people that would come in and out, and it was closer to the university. And so there was the principal was very fluent in English. So
I would say there are differences, but there are also similarities, right? Every mom loves their kid, right? Everyone wants the best for their kid. Your kid, you're your children's champions. And that's similar in Kenya or here in the US, right? In terms of parenting culture, there are differences. Like, we're very respectful. It's expected. You respect elders, no talking back, no questioning, right? Which is a little different than the US. US kids, a lot of them, yes, they can be respectful, but they also question a lot. And that is a no-no, right? And so it's, again, balancing those two worlds, even right now, is it's a bit of a challenge, because I do want, and I love that part of where you're given the ability to question things. And so my kids sometimes will question, but why? Or why can't we do this? How about if we do this? Whereas if it were in Kenya, my word is final. This is what we're doing. Like, no questions. Mm-hmm. What are you doing asking questions?
There are a number of differences. Mm-hmm. One would be like maybe at the younger level, when kids play in Germany, they're encouraged to play with more objects, a lot of puzzles, a lot of very manual, tactile things. Screens and stuff are just not, at least they just were like, don't do that to your kid. On the playground, they would have this big, huge shed, would pull out like stilts and all kinds of like wooden things. And in general, if you had to have help to use one of these toys or use one of these things on the playground, then you weren't supposed to use it. You weren't old enough. And so the parents weren't really allowed to assist children when they play. Okay. And that was a big difference. Like, I was used to going to a playground and following Mabel around. Yes. Behind her, 2 feet away, so that I could help her do whatever she wanted to do on the playground. And in Germany, mothers told me, what are you doing? Don't do that. You have to let them play, or you're stunting their development. So that was just one like big thing.
Mm-hmm. Another thing is, I grew up, and this might not be indicative of everyone in Kenya, but I had never heard "I love you" ever from my dad or my mom. I mean, it's not something that we say. We know they love us. They pay tuition for school. We have clothes. We have food, and you have life, right? And we know that there's love in those things that they do, in provision, in ensuring we're safe and secure. But here in the US, my kids especially my 2 boys who were born and raised here, and the fact that their dad is American, are very used to getting that affection and saying the words and all of that. And it literally was very hard for me initially to even voice it. Of course I love my kids. And you can see the difference very clearly between my daughter, who was raised in Kenya mm-hmm. for the first 8 years of her life, mm-hmm. And my sons, who were raised here. It just comes more naturally to them. Mm-hmm. We just tend to be more conservative from the Kenyan side. Yeah. And so it's taken her and I a little bit more practice over the years of "I love you."
We walked her to school mm-hmm. initially, and we actually got a phone call from the school that we weren't supposed to walk our daughter to school, that she was supposed to walk alone, otherwise we would be hindering her development. Wow. So that was another big difference.
Did you get used to that? Did you accept that?
We accepted it because, and we realized that the children were not walking alone, that there were people that would walk around, mostly older women, that would walk around and sort of police the neighborhood during that time. So it was actually really safe. Interesting. And then she was expected to get pocket change from us so that she could go to the bakery after school and pick up little bread with some cheese on it. Like that was what you did, you know, like that was the common thing.
You know, talking about sex or taboo topics, those are things that we never talked about in Kenya. I don't remember anybody talking to me about menstruation. I don't remember anybody talking to me about the knowledge I got from church or youth groups, you know. Meanwhile, here in the US, it's like the other extreme where they're taught, my son just finished is finishing fifth grade, and they were taught in their family life education component about, you know, private parts, about their whole classes like menstruation and like all these things. And people, Americans in general, American parents are very free and open about things like that. I mean, I still cringe a little bit inside. The Kenyan in me, it's the Kenyan in me. The American in me is more like, this is a good thing. I wish somebody had done this for me, because maybe, you know, I wouldn't have done some missteps along the way, or I'd have been a bit more confident in some things. But I like that part about the American culture, is that they're very open.
Like what was different was just the duration of school. Like you went to school from 8:30 or something to 12:30, and you ate lunch at home. And well, that wasn't going to work for us because we were both working parents, and so we had to arrange with an after-school program, which was only probably about 10% of the school. It wasn't very many, and it turned out to be many of them were immigrants, because their parents had to both work to make the income. Because in Germany, at least in Western Germany, it's different than former Eastern Germany. That there's still the 1950s model of the customary that the mother is the primary child raiser until they're 12 years old, and so there are a lot of governmental programs for mothers who went to school, like college, went to university, and then decided to have children to re-enter the workforce after being out for 12, 15 years.
Is that right?
Yeah, so it's a
stay-at-home moms. Right?
So stay-at-home moms are really, really encouraged in Germany still, and I met a lot of the mothers that were mothers of my daughter's friends, that they were often very sympathetic that I had to work and how, you know, it was so hard to be away from home, and really sorry that I didn't get to stay home. And they didn't understand that I had I wanted to work, and I wanted to get my PhD PhD in the sciences means it's a full-time job, and you're getting paid to be there, and it's a job, you know, and not just being a student. And I enjoyed it very much.
We go to school for longer periods as well.
Okay.
During the school day. Kids usually go in at 8, and they're meant to come out at 3:30, 4:20, depending on what time. But we have what we call prep, which is like before school starts, that kids go to just do, you know, some of them it's just work, extra work that they're doing, or, you know, tuition, tutoring, sorry, not tuition, tutoring. And so it just really depends. We also do trimesters. So here in the US, they close for the summer. My kids are closing in 2 weeks, and they're going to be out of school for 10 weeks. Talk about, like, they completely forget whatever it is, summer brain drain, right? But in Kenya, we go to school for 3 months, you're off for 1, you go back to school for 3, you're off for 1, and then you go for 3 and you're off for 1. So we're always, I mean, there's not that huge of a gap in terms of when you're off school. So your brain is still fresh, you're able to retain information better.
The other thing was the focus on early math for all children in Germany, and I really think we should learn a lot about that in the United States. But every child has algebra before they graduate from elementary school, which is 4th grade. And because they have to decide at 5th grade whether they're going college route, manual labor route, or somewhere in the middle. There's three paths. At 5th grade, they have to decide. And this
They
is
have to decide?
the children.
The children?
Yes. And
How do they do that? I mean, if you don't mind sharing.
no, well, during the 4th grade year, actually it started in the 3rd grade, they would take tours of places around the city, like this is what a firehouse looks like, this is a hospital, this is a university, this is, you know, they would take the kids on tours to different kinds of jobs. And then based on your scores, your grades, and what the teacher thinks that, you know, whether you're better with your mind or better with your hands, they will make decisions and make recommendations. And you can, as a parent, you should respect their recommendation. But if you don't, you have to have a good reason of why you want them to go a certain way. But if you're under a certain scores, you cannot go to university at 5th grade.
Wow.
And so that's a huge difference
Yes.
between here and there. And I know the Netherlands does something similar, actually.
You know, the education system is very different. So, for example, my daughter has had the opportunity to go to school. I left her when she was 2, and she came to the US. And so she went to school up to 3rd grade in Kenya. And then she came to the US and went to school here. And then we all went to Nigeria. And she did about 2 years in Nigeria. And then we came back. Stark difference. For me, personally, having lived in Kenya, gone to school in Kenya, the education system is very different. We are very we're very academically oriented, very rigorous, right? So we spend a lot of time in school. Grades are really, really important. And for many, education and doing well in school is the difference between a very different life, right? A life of mediocrity or just barely making it, and a life where you can catapult yourself into something greater. And so it just differs depending on the social strata that you're on, right? But in terms of school, like my kids, when I can't even begin to tell you, when they've come to the US, they've always been ahead of their class, because whatever they learned, whether it was my daughter when she was learning in Kenya or in Nigeria, or even my son, who went to school when we were in Nigeria, by the time they came to the US, they were top of their class. In fact, they were the noisemakers because they were bored, completely bored. They knew everything that there was to teach. And so they both were on very academically rigorous tracks that we put them in here to kind of keep them engaged.
You know, my grandmother was a teacher, and she always had homeschool stuff at home, and she tutored a lot of kids in the neighborhood. She, you know, tutored them in English and things and math. And she, when we were bored around my grandma's house, she would do flashcards and Scrabble and anything that could constantly be like flashing my brain with like information. And so I felt like she really gave me a lot of opportunity to learn all the time, music or whatever. And my mom always had all of the art lying around and paint, and you know, so I had the ability to learn all of these different ways to do art right there in my house. And she introduced me to a lot of things through the church and also through Boy Scouts, because she was a Boy Scout leader. So I was also kind of an honorary Boy Scout and Girl Scouts.
You have an older brother, right?
I had an older brother, so there was a lot of opportunity to learn all the time. And so I felt like that's what I wanted Mabel to have, was this kind of always these little opportunities to learn.
You know, when you're growing up, you don't want to be like your mom for a lot of people. I come from a family of 10. I have 5 brothers and 4 sisters, so I come from a large family. And my mom, I have no idea how she did it, because I have 3, and like I already have gray hair, white in there. But she was a good mom, and she was a very strong mom. I'm a lot of who I am today and the type of mom I am today is also because of things that I saw in my mom. She's very kind, has always been very generous, even when We thought she shouldn't have been as generous. And so some of those things I have taken upon somehow. I didn't realize I did, but I have. I think, I look back to my grandma. My grandma was very strict, extremely strict. My mom was strict but she wasn't the main disciplinarian, She talked a lot. But my dad would literally look at you and you shiver in your boots. You're just like, oh my God, I'm dead. I do struggle, like I said, because my mom was very, not just my mom, but also society and motherhood in that context was you don't ask questions, you do what you're told, right? So, and I saw that with my grandma as well, to my mom, right? And so
in Germany, actually, that kind of parenting is exactly like what I was doing and what I had experienced, because mothers are really involved with their children's education. That's something I didn't mention, but the teachers don't check your homework. The parents check your homework. And the homework's all done at home. And they had a setup at school to show you what your desk is supposed to look like at home for your children. And so it took that whole involvement in her education to another level. So you were kind of doing a little bit of homeschooling, but yet not. And we were juggling. Brandon and I juggled sort of split schedules to make it work, because after school care only went till 2 o'clock, so still wasn't all day.
And then coming to the U.S., I've learned, and I love the fact that you do get to question sometimes, right? I tell my kids this because I said so, right? But sometimes I do like that. I think it's one of the things that I learned and I've really taken as part of the American culture is the questioning part. Question. It's okay to question.
I've never regretted going to Germany for the time that we did. I mean, it was eye-opening for all of us, and not just the three of us, but for our whole family.
I love taking the good out of everything that I can get, right? I grew up as a Kenyan. I still consider myself Kenyan to the core. And there are definitely things that I would never change about that experience. And then there are things that I have learned living in the U.S., growing up in the U.S., that I absolutely love and I take, right? So I take the best. I'm a taker of the best of both worlds.
Socially, it was good for me to get out of my comfort zone and just do something completely different and start from scratch with somewhere that you just didn't know. It's really enriched my marriage, which being alone, just the two of them, it was like that made a huge impact on us, because we were like, all of a sudden it was just us, and we had to make it work, and we had this child that was dependent on us, and it was like, okay, we gotta do this together, or it's just, so there was no time for fighting, there was no time for bickering. In the beginning, we slowly started to bicker a little bit later, but in the beginning it was much more unifying. Yeah. From Germany to Florida to California and then Wisconsin, with a little stint in Pennsylvania there in the middle, and we moved to Wisconsin about 1.5 years ago.
Okay. And your daughter is about to go to college.
She's about to go to college in Portland, Oregon.
All right.
So she's moving back to the West Coast. She'll move around.
All right.
I am a divorced mom of 3.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you work?
I do work. I work 2 jobs.
2 jobs.
One I get paid for. The other one is a passion project.
Okay.
My second job, because it literally is a full-time job, I work with Afrimaha. And we are here in Omaha. We're a local organization created by Africans living in Nebraska. And we bring people together to celebrate and share African culture, because it's something that I have great pride in. And I try and impart it to my kids and anybody really who is open-minded and wants to learn anything about African culture, they can come to our events. We did the African Cultural Festival last year. It was a phenomenal success. We're doing it again this year, September 14th at Stinson Park. It's going to be fantastic. So we're just trying to continue experiencing Africa in the heart of Omaha, because this is our new home. So we're going to make it comfortable.
Bridget Kelly does not speak with an accent, but her life story doesn't belong to a particular nation, race, or borders. Her story is simply human. I now invite you to listen to Bridget's journey and her second chance to life.
So this was back in 2002. I was a 24-year-old school teacher at the beginning of the summer after I'd finished my second year of teaching, and I had just picked up a friend at the airport and then driven back, dropped her off at her home and driven back to my apartment. It was very late at night, and I went into my apartment. I was just getting ready for bed like any other night. When I heard this loud boom coming from, it sounded like the front wall of my apartment. It felt like it shook the apartment. And I hurried over to the front door and I looked out the peephole and I watched as this man was running at my door. And he kicked the door in, so 2 kicks, and the door gave way, and broke the locks, the deadbolt. And I stumbled backward and he pointed a gun at me and said, he wanted money. And that's how this experience began. That changed my life. That night, I was abducted at gunpoint. He drove in my car to an ATM where I was robbed. And then he, again at gunpoint, he drove me to a distance away to where there was this kind of undeveloped field on the edge of a subdivision, and drove into the field. And there I was raped and shot 3 times in the back. I played dead. He got back in the car and he drove away. And then as soon as he was gone, I was up first on my hands and knees and looking down at my body and assessing the, where I could see the blood. And I got up and ran out of that field. Police later said it was about 200 yards in the middle of the night, and was able to reach help at a house nearby. And a wonderful man, thank God, opened the door to me and called 911. I was taken to the hospital. My life was saved in 6.5 hours of surgery. And at about that time I was getting out of surgery, my attacker was arrested. And 10 weeks to the day, he was sentenced to life in prison after that. So
the attack carried by an 18-year-old left Bridget with type 1 diabetes and long road to recovery. Bridget moved to New York, where she earned her master's degree, met her husband, and today is a stay-at-home mom of 2 boys and advocate for victims of sexual assault.
I think I have to be a role model for them in how I deal with it. And so I hope they will learn from what I've learned, which is that, bad things happen in this world, not only to me, but bad things happen. It's reality. I don't want to scare them, but I don't want to hide the truth from them either. And so I want to show them that you can, have these really difficult, traumatic, bad things happen. And that doesn't mean your life is over. You have to find a way forward. And that's the hard part. The scary part is there's no one showing you okay, just do X, Y, Z and you'll be okay. We can look to other survivors of sexual assault, of other bad things, violence, and look to others to see how they've made it through. And I think that's really, really valuable. But also ultimately it's your own path to walk. You have to figure it out. That's hard. That's scary. And so I hope that my kids will learn resilience, learn that you can never give up. Your life is worth too much. You have a responsibility to kind of make something good of your life, because there's other people watching you all the time.
What is your expectation? What do you want to change?
Well, I mean, I have to go back to 2002 when this first happened to me. And there was, and within my family, we were very open about everything that had happened, that I had been abducted, I had been raped, I had been shot, and we were very open about all of that had happened. And that was the first time that I had the experience of people talking back to me, and people in real life right in front of me telling me their stories of rape. In 2002, I did not know anyone prior to this who was speaking publicly about having been raped. And you really have to take your mind back to that time, don't you? Because it's such a different era now, in a good way. And back then, I had never heard someone I knew talk about rape. I never heard a celebrity talk about rape. I never heard anything, and I never heard it. I never heard anyone say I was raped. And so I saw that people were silenced, that other crimes people were able to talk about and have sympathy for them. And then I started to hear these stories where these people were not getting the support that they needed, and they were suffering in silence, and they were not able to connect with other survivors because for whatever reason they were getting the message that this was not okay to talk about, or that maybe they had done something wrong. And that was so that really made me sad and angry that people who were suffering were being kept from getting the help and support that they needed, and also the fact that these crimes were even occurring, that these people, these criminals, are doing these things and basically getting away with it, I felt. And so that was the initial motivation to start talking and help. I just needed to be a part of this conversation to make it okay. Just one person who was trying to make it okay to use this language, to say, I was raped, it's not my fault, I was sexually assaulted, this is how things occurred, and I'm the victim here, I survived this, and I'm not to blame. And so I wanted that kind of language and knowledge to be out there more. And now, fast forward 2019, it's a totally different era. Now we have, of course, the Me Too movement, and then prior to that exploding, there was and there still is the campus sexual assault activism going on. That's amazing. These young women who are allowing these older women to have the courage to speak out as well. There are really amazing things going on. And so now I feel like, my motivation was just to be in my little corner of the world, to give the language to talk about this stuff that was so important for people to be able to then get help. And so that was my motivation, and I guess still is, but now it's so different because there are all these amazing, brave women speaking truth to power and getting their stories out there and really educating people in a big way.
Thank you for watching. I am Enkela Bebio.